What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Spending my evening here putting out some mulch, building up some soil in the food forest. Had a lot of stuff get smoked in the frost, like that mango. She's not looking too happy over there. I don't know why the loquat's just looking like super green. Couldn't be happier. But anyway, I put this out on Instagram. Got a lot of good feedback from you guys. Spoke about 250-year revolutionary cycle. If you go back 500 years from today rather. Basically, you're in the Martin Luther Reformation. Technology was a game changer in this point. You kind of are in the dark ages at that point. Kings are running things. Priests are really running things. And the printing press comes about. And so it makes it possible to create an idea and share it at a low cost, at scale. Basically the first time in history. I mean, before that, the main book that was transcribed was the Bible. You would write it by hand as a scholar. And if your family had one, or really your kingdom had one, it was a big deal. It was a huge, huge deal. Everything was handwritten. They called them scrolls. And it was a big deal. It was a prestigious job to have too. It was a very, very highly educated job. Printing press comes out. Martin Luther's like, hey, I got an idea. I think I can go direct to God. I don't think they need the priests. Priests are like, yeah, I don't think so. That's not how it works. You're going to do what we tell you to do, and you're going to pay us our tax, and if not, we're going to burn you at the stake. And he's like, yeah, I think you're wrong. And he basically prints up his idea, puts it up on the church's door, nails it to the church's door, and distributes it in pamphlets. You fast forward a couple of generations, what you have is you eventually have the Mayflower. That's a direct result of what occurs there. So you've got like this revolutionary like moment where all of a sudden the printing press makes this possible. Now you've got settlers that are moving over to the New World, and you go another 250 years and you end up in the 1760s, 1750s, and things start brewing. They start brewing real heavy. And essentially what happens is you've got a bunch of colonialists that are like, you know what, I don't think we need a king. King's really far away. I'm not really sure why we're paying taxes to him. He's not letting us export, or he's not letting us sell cast iron here. Like it's got to go to England, and we have to buy cast iron from England, even though it's a higher quality. But you think about buying like a kettle or a stove, a wood-burning stove for your cabin or something like that. It was illegal. He eventually taxes tea at 6%. A bunch of the elites are like, and there was a technological shift here. It was a revolutionary shift, and that they found a way to take a musket ball and spin it, rifle it, and essentially send it downrange like a football. And so what that gave the colonialists is a massive advantage over the largest superpower, largest military in the world was the British Crown. And essentially a bunch of peasant farmers went out there with a new piece of technology, which is essentially just a rifled barrel, and beat them. And they took lots of losses, especially in the first few years. They took lots of losses, but ultimately it changed warfare as we knew it. Instead of, marching lines, a bunch of redcoats going out to march like gentlemen and have like actual wars like they did over in Europe, over here in America, they're like, yeah, we're going to hide in the woods and wait for your people to come through the woods, and we're going to snipe you, essentially. There was a piece of technology that made that possible. Today, when we're seeing the collapse or the decline of these supply chains, and we're seeing how powerful local and state and federal governments are all around the world, and that they can actually literally mandate what goes into your body, and people are kind of waking up to like, you don't have a lot of rights, and you never really did. Your governments grew to a point where, up until 1913 in North America, there wasn't even an income tax. All right, and up until like the 40s, there wasn't even like a real income tax. It was just like a little slap on the hand for like the super elites. And so we're at this point. We're at this another 250-year period right now. And we've got this crypto technology. And I know a lot of people are kind of turned off by, oh, it's a bubble, this, that. I think it's interesting that it allows us to have a ledger of account. I think of crypto as a spreadsheet that's decentralized and on everybody's computer. And I don't care whether we're doing money, because money is the easiest thing to do. We're doing data. We're doing videos. So we don't want these videos to go away. So what could I do? I could load it on the Ethereum blockchain. Literally, I could put this on the Ethereum blockchain. If anybody downloads the Ethereum blockchain at any point in time, years after I'm gone, you're going to find it. And so this is interesting because we're at this spot in history where you're starting to see things get canceled, this, that. But the technology is making it possible where it's going to be impossible relatively soon. And we're reaching this, and I believe we're on this 250-year revolutionary cycle. I think that you're seeing this manifest right here live time with the Canadian convoy, the Canadian trucker convoy. they have a GoFundMe page. GoFundMe page gets shut down. All of a sudden, like, everyone's like, wait, GoFundMe can just do that? Yeah, they can. The fiat banking system can do that. Maybe we should send them crypto. Okay, well, now this is interesting because now the fuel suppliers need to accept crypto. Now the oil companies need to accept crypto. Now, so all of a sudden you're like, well, we're not there yet, but we're moving to the spot where we're going to be able to have a ledger of account that's going to be outside of government control. And it was like that. But in the last 100 years, they've completely taken over the currency and the monetary system. So I think what we saw 500 years ago was a separation of church and state. And then we saw the separation of government run by the people. And now I think that we're possibly could see a situation many decades from now, 2 or 3 decades from now, where we see the separation of state and money, and the state loses the control over money. And then everything's on call. Everything's up for renegotiation. Everything's up for debate. Every social contract that we have in place, Social Security, to higher education, to everything is completely flipped on its head. And, no power that be wants to allow the nice, beautiful ability of having a currency printing machine to just disappear on them. Like that's not in their best interest. And so I'm watching this Canadian trucker thing real closely, seeing like today they had a video out there where they had a Zoom meeting where they're like, oh, should we send the military, this, that? And it's like, hopefully this doesn't happen, but this is where we are in the cycle. These things are going to happen. Hopefully they don't turn into Kent State. If you're not familiar with that, essentially the U.S. military came in and shot some students back in the 60s or 70s, I believe, and it was a mess. And actually, if you talk to people that lived through the 60s, they all said like, we thought the U.S. was gonna be rocky in the 60s. There was race riots. A big part of Washington, D.C. burned down. I actually lived in a neighborhood where like part of it was burned down. There's photos and things like that. And some of the restaurants about like what it looked like next door and stuff, there's just kind of like memorabilia stuff. And it got through it. We got through that period of history, but we weren't on that 250-year cycle. And, there weren't, basically at this point in time, I just think it's very, very fascinating. And, just the ability to be able to spread ideas. And yeah, of course, Google and the rest of them can shut it down, but there are many other situations popping up right now. Like if you're watching Odyssey, it's literally blockchain video. This is getting very interesting. And, I think, if I could do one thing, just encourage you to look at that, look what's happening, look at the last revolutionary periods. If we are in one, it's going to be a 30-year period of time. This is not a 2 or 3 or 5 year thing. This is not like a you elect your guy thing. This is a big societal change and a big, big shift. And it's a generational shift. It doesn't like really ice down and chill out until my kids are adults or my grandkids are starting to be born. This is like, you got the baby boomers who had life one way their entire lives. You've got me, the millennials, who are like, we're kind of getting screwed here. Like the millennials really got the short end of the stick. And then you've got, us, we're raising kids. Some of us aren't even raising kids at this point in time. Like they're just, the millennials they did not raise families to this tune of like the great generation, the GI generation. And they could later on. But my point there is that there's these demographical changes that are occurring. And they happen to coincide, this fourth turning cycle. 1, we're in the fourth turning. 2, we're at the end of a long-term debt cycle. 3, we're at the end of a fiat currency that was the global reserve currency, and no currency over the last 50 years. That's the US dollar. We're like on that line right now. You've got massive controlling governments that are getting really, really overbearing and literally are almost incompetent. And that's the one thing I've noticed in the last year. I gave them a lot more credit than they deserved. A lot of these governments are super incompetent. Like you think that they've got like all this handled and like, they've got all this big data and stuff. They can't even process like tax returns from a year and a half ago. They're just, they can't pull out of Afghanistan properly. They can't, there's just all sorts of stuff where you're like, there's like this managerial class of people and they don't create any value. And then you just have like one of the largest world's populations that we've ever had. To our knowledge, and most people don't attempt to grow their own food. Most people don't, they've been accustomed to a certain way of life, and I think that all of that is on call right now. And I just want to point out that like we're on that 250-year line. I believe in cycles. Not everybody does. I definitely believe in the demographical cycles. I believe in the short-term technology cycles. About every 50 years, we're literally at one of those, where in the physical world, we stopped advancing about 50 years ago. And you're like, what are you talking about? I'm talking like fuel injectors, man. Like we haven't had better vehicles since, I mean, like what? We got like Priuses, we have hybrids. Like we had hybrids in the 1800s, no kidding. Like 1890, you can look it up. The first cars were electric, by the way. So it's like we haven't really, airplanes haven't flown faster since 1974. They haven't flown on less fuel since 1974, commercial jetliners. We reached this technological peak, and then we had a technological boom. We had another 50-year cycle in digital. We can do this now, and then you're starting to see this kind of dip out and kind of die down, and you can see this by like companies like Facebook changing their name to Meta Platforms, and then the biggest stock drop last week in history, $250 billion just evaporated out of thin air overnight, which also, deflation could be a real thing. Things could just evaporate out of thin air and cause a daisy chain. And I think at some point we're going to reach that, but I just want to put it on your radar, like look around, start becoming agile, do what you can do, be charitable, be helpful, and stand up for freedom. If the opportunity exists every day to stand up for freedom and to become more robust and more agile. And I want to encourage you to do that, because that's, I want to win this period of history. I don't want to end up in this new global world order of like, everywhere you go, we're going to scan your face and your digital currency is going to be on your chip, and your medical history is going to, it's not the world I want to live in. I want to go back to having bonfires on the beach and, riding four-wheelers around, and not an EPA, and like let the market figure out what's going to be built and sold. But anyway, guys, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing these videos. If you're a super fan, share them with a friend, one friend, family member. Helps it go. The channel's been growing because of you guys hitting that like button and commenting below. So I appreciate it. Peace.